Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today, on today's episode, we'll have Sonny Tai, as our guest. Today's title is From Taipei to New York, an immigrant Marine's Path to Starting and Scaling an AI Company. He is a CEO of Actuate, a New York-based AI tech startup. He was born in Taiwan and grew up in South Africa, then moved to the U.S. with his family to get away from gun violence in South Africa a year before 9/11. Galvanized by the attacks on his adoptive country, Sonny joined the Marines and served for nearly a decade in the reserves and active duty before leaving the Marine Corps to attend business school at the University of Chicago before starting Actuate. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was going to say that, but you stole my line.
Well, it's quite a mouthful. That's quite a journey. So I don't even know how to get unpacked in that. Is there
Yeah.
what stands out most to in your memory in terms of all the things you've gone through?
Oh my gosh, that's a crazy question. But I do know the reason why when you reached out to me, and I figured that I'd go with telling this story instead of something kind of more technical, is because because I was a political science major. So, I'm starting an AI company as someone who stopped delving into coding when he was 14 years old because he wanted to play Diablo 2 and StarCraft instead. And the second thing is that I once ran an Ask Me Anything AMA on Reddit and found that it absolutely blew up with 27,000 upvotes and made Reddit's front page. So I was like, okay, well, it seems like
achievement. That's a real achievement.
yeah. I'll send you a link later on,
Okay.
but I was like, okay, well, it looks like this is a real story that people are interested in. So why not tell this story if it's going to be a podcast that people are going to be interested in listening to? And maybe it's a little bit unconventional. Now, to answer your question of what's the thing that stands out the most, do you mean throughout my life or throughout my startup career?
Open-ended. You choose.
Okay. Well, the thing that stands out the most is probably joining the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I have to say. I'd say most Taiwanese Americans aren't joining the Marine Corps.
Right. Same
You
with
are
Vietnamese
Asian?
Americans. Very, very rare.
I feel like Vietnamese Americans aren't, it's more common to join the military, same with Koreans. And I think the reason for that is historical, right? A lot of Vietnamese immigrants came to the U.S. after the fall of Saigon. And for Koreans, a lot of Koreans, maybe the older generation, but I think it is passed down to the younger generation as well. My best friend is, he was a Marine with me and became an Army Special Forces officer, and he's Korean American. But I feel like Vietnamese, especially those who are descendants of the South Vietnamese regime and Koreans, have a special affinity towards the U.S. military because they felt like the U.S. military historically stood up for them in combat against the enemy. Now, Taiwanese, you can make that case as well, but I don't feel like that the link is as strong there. And therefore, most Taiwanese Americans are, they go into entrepreneurship. They're expected to be lawyers, doctors, consultants, whatever the case is, like very conventional white-collar positions, and not a lot choose to join the Marine Corps. I'm happy to dive into what my reason is and things like that. I'm super open book, but don't want to put the cart before the horse too much because I know you got interview you got to run.
Oh no, this is all about you. This story goes wherever it goes, and
Okay.
I think the more unconventional, the more interesting and authentic
Okay.
stories become. People are smart and they can tell an authentic story from a fluffed one.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll tell my life story then. So, again, I'm a startup founder. I was born in Taiwan. I grew up in South Africa. The reason why we took that journey is because when I was 3 years old, my father passed away from an asthma attack. So the ambulance got stuck in traffic and didn't make it in time. And if you imagine late 1980s Taipei, just kind of like a lot of big cities of the time, air pollution, smog was a big issue. So if you're an asthmatic, things are even way worse for you. And traffic is also really, really bad. So I inherited asthma from my father, and I ended up fraudulently enlisting in the Marine Corps later on. I'll tell you about that. I think it's too late for the government to get me now. Statute of limitations. But I inherited asthma, and I had asthma attack of my own when I was 5 years old. And my mom took me to the ICU. And I vaguely remember being in the ICU, but what I do remember very vividly was my mom used to tell me bedtime stories. And I don't remember any bedtime story except for one. And she just saw something in the news and she wanted to tell me about history. And she said, once upon a time, there was a bad guy. His name was Hussein. And he invaded a tiny little country called Kuwait because he was greedy and wanted their resources and land. But the good guys, led by a man named Bush, came and saved Kuwait. Right? She was really just trying to tell history. But I became this fervently pro-American foreigner as a little Taiwanese kid when I was young. So
how young are we talking?
5 years old, literally.
Okay.
5 years old. So we later on immigrated to South Africa with my mom and my sister after I finished first grade in Taiwan. So lived there from when I was like 7 or 8 years old until when I was 13 years old. And South Africa is a wonderful place to live. But we also went during a pretty turbulent time, like the transition from the apartheid government to Nelson Mandela's administration. Right? And there was a spike in violent crime. And why is there a spike in violent crime in South Africa? Because the black South Africans ended up taking power in South Africa, of course, because of free and fair democratic elections. But then I think there was a lot of resentment that, hey, we have political power now, but we still don't have economic opportunity. And I think because of that resentment, there was a lot of backlash. And as a result, there was crime. There was crime. So a lot of people ended up leaving South Africa. And my mom always dreamt that we would come to the United States one day. So she came to the U.S. one day, probably in the late 90s, I believe, and found a woman who offered a job to pay her $12 an hour on a H-1B visa sponsorship to be a procurement manager. Like a procurement manager, even in the early 2000s, should be paying like $60K, right? But this is a company that just dramatically underpaid immigrants, sponsor H-1B visa, knowing that you're tied to the company and you can't do anything about it. But my mom took the job, and we came to the U.S. So I attended high school in the Chicago suburbs. My mom ended up getting married, so I got my green card right after I graduated from high school, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And how that came about was that I went and took the ASVAB, just the test to get into the military, just for just for fun. And like hey, you know how Asians are with standardized tests sometimes. 96th percentile, no effort. And of course the recruiter started calling me, blowing up my phone, and he said all the things that a 17-year-old kid wants to hear: honor, courage, commitment. Like, do you want to serve your country, prove yourself, prove that you're mentally strong and physically tough. All these things that resonated in a guy that's like really just still trying to fit into mainstream American society and to prove that belong. So confluence of a few things made me join the Marine Corps. One, a patriotic sense of duty that was kind of unintentionally ingrained in me by my mom by telling me a bedtime story since I was 5 years old. Okay? Secondly, not fully understanding the context and the gravity of the 9/11 attacks that happened 3 years before I ended up joining the Marine Corps. I think that also played a role. Then third is I'm Taiwanese. And I'm under no qualms that, or no illusions that the U.S. 7th Fleet is what keeps Taiwan safe in a sense, right? So I felt like, okay, well, I never got a chance to do my conscription duty in Taiwan because I never really lived in Taiwan. By serving in the U.S. military, I have an opportunity to serve my adoptive country and my home country at the same time. So that's what kicked off my Marine Corps career. I ended up serving the reserves, graduating top of my class out of training, got meritoriously promoted Lance Corporal, serving the reserves took a gap year, serving reserves for 5 years, while I went to University of Illinois for undergrad. As mentioned before, political science major, because I was interested in like global geopolitics, international relations, and things like that. Became a U.S. citizen in 2008, so I could apply for officer candidate school to be a Marine Corps officer. Went to training, somehow passed, and didn't do as well as I did when out of enlisted training, and found out I couldn't commission as a Marine Corps officer. Why couldn't I commission? Because military officers can only have one citizenship, the U.S. You can't have 2 or 3 citizenships. So I had to give up Taiwan and South Africa. Well, the complication there was that the Taiwanese government wouldn't let me renounce my citizenship because I haven't done my conscription duty, which is mandatory. So I was like, well, Mom, like, what can I do now? Do I go find a regular job? What's the case? And this is, look, we all know what happened in 2008, right? Financial crisis. Finding a normal job wasn't that easy either. So this is going to be my career. So my mom, we actually became friends with the Taiwanese consulate to the South African government before South Africa broke off diplomatic relations with Taiwan when we were in South Africa. And now he's very senior in the Taiwanese government. My mom pulled a few strings, and my paperwork came down. So I was able to become a Marine Corps officer. So
she was good with you going down that path, even knowing it's a... Oh, okay.
No. She cried when I went to boot camp, but she felt better when I went and became an officer, So yeah, I was able to commission as a Marine Corps officer after graduating, then went to training in Quantico, Virginia, like all the training all Marine officers go through. And I served on active duty for 4 years. I went to Afghanistan from mid to late 2012. Worked at a desk job, to be honest with you, like never saw combat or anything like that. And applied to business school when I was in Afghanistan. Was lucky enough to get a half scholarship to the University of Chicago. Came back, went to University of Chicago, became a management consultant. But ultimately, like, there's two things I was always interested in. One was I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Ever since my mom decided to go back to Taiwan and bring home a Windows 95 computer to South Africa. When I was a little kid, I just fell in love with computers and fell in love with the concept of one day I can build something that's even remotely as impactful as what Bill Gates built at Microsoft. And the other thing was I just had an interest about public safety. I had an interest in protecting other people. I have this notion in my head that if you're strong, if you're privileged, you should stand up for the weak and the undefended. So I wanted to find a way to do so. So after being a management consultant for a couple of years, I wanted to look into, like, we left South Africa because of gun violence, but we also have gun violence here in America. And after a Las Vegas shooting, I wanted to look into how can we use technology to help save lives we're not going to solve the gun violence problem, but how can we save lives when these things inevitably happen? So I ended up interviewing a bunch of law enforcement leaders and law enforcement officers, interviewed teachers, like basically anyone who get potentially involved in one of these incidents, anybody who thinks about how to mitigate these incidents. And a piece of feedback I got was like, hey, I wish security cameras could detect guns. That'll be really helpful. So I did a bunch of research and found that AI models were increasingly outperforming human beings as long as you train them on the right data set. And things like the ImageNet challenge, like AI models that teams submit that are trained on these generic data sets like, Coco or whatnot are outperforming Stanford researchers that are actually manually labeling images, which is pretty cool. It's all, okay, well, how can we use computer vision to detect guns? So that's how our company was born, and came up with the idea in late 2017, and really started working on it in earnest in early 2018. As mentioned before, again, I'll say this for a third time, I'm a political science major. I don't have that much hubris to think that I can build AI technology without help. So I was very lucky that I met my co-founder, Ben Giomek, who was a Microsoft AI program manager, like super smart guy, graduated #1 in his class from Bowdoin, also University of Chicago MBA, but took a lot of very quantitative data science heavy courses throughout his life, and also from work he did at Microsoft, he's very familiar with how to build this kind of technology. So basically one of those like first dates that you just hit it off, right? 30 minutes turned to 3 hours, and we decided to start working together. So.
How'd you meet him?
Long-winded story, but that's my life.
How'd you meet your co-founder?
LinkedIn. I found that the value that I bring to our company primarily is I'm a networking ninja. I can get access to anybody that's not super, super, super high profile, right? Like if you ask me to connect to Elon Musk, A, I don't care. Like, and B, like that's too much effort. But I'm good at getting people to give me a time of day. So I asked him out coffee, and we had a coffee chat, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy knows all the things that I don't know. This guy's good at all the things that I'm not good at. And And yeah, we started working together.
So I've taken a look at your website. I've noticed you address a lot of different like demographics of users in terms of your, I guess, different. You have your school situations, your public, I guess, public outdoors situations. I imagine all that comes from your conversations with people in this space. Is that right?
Well, it's absolutely, and I think that doesn't just apply to us. It applies to any company, any successful company. You have to be customer centric, and every single, even from an academic point of view, where I think sometimes the academic point of view is too rigid and not adaptable enough. But even from an academic point of view, when schools teach entrepreneurship, what they teach is something called customer discovery. And what customer discovery is just having a ton of conversations with customers before you even start building. Okay, so you understand what keeps customers up at night, what sucks about what they're currently using, what are they willing to invest resources in just to make these problems go away. So all of the features we build out here at Actuate, they've gone through extensive customer discovery, whether it's with existing customers or prospective customers. So we really understand at a fundamental level what makes customers uncomfortable and what's costing their organization money or making their organization feel unsafe. And then we evaluate the capabilities within our company. Okay, what's a resource requirement in building out these features that are going to add value to customers? And we were consistently pushing out, I mean, even beyond the first MVP that we pushed out, we're always pushing out MVPs, saying, hey, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer, you said 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago that this is what you needed. We said we're going to go out there and build it. This is what we've built. Please give us feedback. And that kind of just creates a continuous virtuous cycle that you're always in tune with what the customer is looking for, what the customer wants. And I think that's really helped us win, especially over the last year and a half of our company.
Do you have a ballpark number of the number of people you've talked to in your customer discovery process?
Shoot, 200 plus, I'd say.
200 plus? Do you think that's a
Now I'm talking about
conventional number?
I really don't know because I can only speak for myself and not other founders. Okay. Maybe more than that, to be honest with you. It's been 3 years, right? So let me do some back of the envelope math. If I average 4 meetings a week, 4 or 5 meetings a week, 3 years, 4 meetings a week, I mean, that'll be 200 conversations just in 1 year. So, so more than that, substantially more than that.
And how are you?
Less than 1,000. How are you 100? Yeah.
Finding all these people to have a conversation with? That's definitely a non-trivial number.
I think the way to do it is by being a human being. And I know that this is, I think that a lot of founders and salespeople in particular, you're always looking for how to optimize, how to drive efficiencies. So, and I tried this before, and what I mean is like, hey, can I send out mass emails? I tried a LinkedIn bot that'll automatically send LinkedIn messages. Hey, first name, I noticed that your company did this. Like, we all get those, right? But the great thing about being a founder is that you're selling, but you're also always getting sold to. After we announced our Series A, I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten from people trying to sell me widget A or widget B. And I'm starting to get so annoyed that I'm sending them all to spam. Okay? And unless somebody writes a really thoughtful, customized note, then I'll always give them a time of day. So, like, do unto others what you want done upon yourself, right? Or whatever, the golden rule. And I teach our sales team that reach out to, like, whatever would annoy you, don't reach out to other people in that way. So how do I get so many people to give me the time of day? And our sales team is the same way. Everything is handwritten, not handwritten, but hand typed, custom, thoughtful, done the research. If you reach out to customer, it's like, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, did research about your company, did research about your background. This is what resonates with me, and I would love to better understand A, B, or C about your company, about your needs. Is there any chance you'd be willing to have a conversation about it? Even better than something customized, ask for a warm introduction. Like, I don't care what business you're in. I mean, even if you're in the Marine Corps, to management consultant, to entrepreneurship, to investment management, whatever the case is, human beings are social creatures, and we're relationship driven. I have often taken, like, my rate of taking meetings when it's a warm intro, especially from someone I like, is like 95+%. Because if I respect someone, I'll give them time of day if they say, hey, would you be willing to talk to someone? Right? If it's someone that I vaguely barely know, it's still 80 to 90% just to give them that respect, right? So we ask a lot for warm intros. And you might ask, hey, is that scalable? Yeah, it's scalable as long as you continuously hire people who have very high EQ, who have the ability to build their own network, right? So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but how do I get so many people to talk to me? It's about being empathetic. It's about being thoughtful, and really trying to help them solve problems instead of treating relationships as transactional.
I really like that idea. I think the core, you're right on the money in terms of humans are social creatures that value relationships. I talk to a lot of people across the wealth spectrum, and I think what I've seen to be more predictive of happiness is the quality of relationships versus the quantity of bitcoins they have or the quantity of US dollars or whatever currency they use.
Well, of course, that's a given, right? Because I think, we learned in economics. Anyone who's went to university has taken probably a basic level economics course, and what are you taught within the first 4 weeks? Law of marginal utility, law of diminishing returns, right? From 0 to 50K in income, your happiness goes up dramatically. 50K to 100, it goes up some more, but maybe not as dramatic. 100 to 200, yeah, some more, but you're starting to diminish. 200 to 500, 500 to a million to 10 million. I think you just start flatlining, and it's like eating pizza also. Like your first slice of pizza feels amazing. Your 10th slice to your 11th slice, you're starting to feel like you're gonna throw up, right? So you're a negative utility now. And what do I mean by that? For you to go from having $5 million to having $50 million, $5 million you can keep on a down low, live a very, very comfortable but fairly modest life, and people aren't just all coming to you for money. Yeah. What I found, I felt emotionally, because it's not my money, it's a company's money. But after we raised Series A, and we have $9 million in the bank, now people are coming out of woodwork asking, selling, just treating things very transactionally, right? And it makes me feel dirty. It's like, you don't value me. Like, where were you when we were just a seed stage company? But now you see dollar signs are coming after me. I'm guessing that's what a lot of very wealthy people feel like. I have a friend from undergrad who got drafted by the Washington Nationals, and he became a major league pitcher. I don't have his number anymore. He changed his number. I don't blame him, right? I would never go and ask him for something, but he shrank his circle dramatically, which is understandable. And I think a lot of very wealthy people just end up having to do that because people treat them with a transactional lens. And I think that's a big reason why they will be less happy than, say, you or I.
I think so. I don't have the hard number in my mind, but I think I've read a report somewhere that said once you're people who make north of $1 million, on average, are less happy than those who make around 200,000, because somewhere in that range you hit the negative marginal utility per dollar, and it's unfortunate. You bring up a couple scenarios where people ask you for money. There's also the scenarios where people sue you for money. Poor people don't really sue other poor people just because they know that there's nothing in it. Yeah.
But think about it, right? Let's say 200K in income versus $1 million income. 200K in income, you're driving a Tesla. You may have a 5-bedroom home, depending where you live. You can comfortably probably support as long as you don't live in San Francisco Bay Area or Manhattan, you can comfortably support a wife and 2 kids or a husband and 2 kids. You can even be an angel investor. I know you're not technically accredited yet, but maybe you have some side income. At $1 million, okay. Well, you live in a bigger mansion. Does that make you that much happier? You have a Bentley instead of a Tesla. Does that make you that much happier? Right? Like,
more to clean.
These things don't fundamentally accrue to additional happiness, but the downside is so much more, right? People suing you because they want to make a quick buck. People looking at you, and every time people shake your hand, they're looking for something from you, right? Like, all these things just make you feel worse. And so So I know we're getting off topic here, but one day if I have the good fortune, because I have a great team, so I'm thinking that we're on a trajectory of having a successful exit of this company, whether it's through IP or otherwise. Um, I want to go out there and do philanthropy, and give most of the wealth away because I know keeping all that wealth just doesn't move the needle for me, and I'd rather derive happiness by making other people happy. So.
You read my mind as to the next question. I recognize a lot of people realize that money doesn't lead to happiness. So yeah, if you had $100 million from an exit at some point in your life, and call it you have another 30 years to live, what would you allocate that money towards?
I would allocate single-digit millions to myself. Well, first of all, like I'm gonna take care of mom and my stepfather.
Yeah.
Look, we're Asian. You understand the Eastern values of filial piety. Even though I grew up most of my life in the West, I do believe in that. I do believe it's a responsibility, and that my mom's gonna have whatever the heck she wants for the rest of her life, right? But that's gonna be of like very low percentage. I'll set aside single-digit millions as a nest egg and live a relatively like comfortable but relatively modest life, right? I might get a Tesla because it's cool, and the rest of it, I'm just gonna find a way to give away. Like I don't think I'm a saint or anything like that, right? I think I'm just a bleeding heart. I grew up in South Africa where, on one neighborhood we lived in a neighborhood with all the white people, where it's very like it looks like Western Europe. Then you drive a couple of kilometers and you see towns where people live with no running water, corrugated tin and cardboard shacks. And we literally had school tours where we toured these shanty towns. And now looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's poverty tourism, and that's so bad. And I think they meant the school meant well. It's like, hey, look at how these people are living. Look how fortunate you are. But it's kind of like, I hope the residents got paid for it, because that's kind of messed up. But also left an indelible impact in my mind. It's like, hey, there's we're blessed with a lot, and there's a lot of people who are not as fortunate. And I think that, like, talent is universal, but opportunity is not. So to the extent that we can create opportunities for other people and alleviate their suffering, I think those with means, whether by with means it means you make $100,000 a year, or if you make $100 million a year, you should, as much as possible, find ways to give back.
Are you interested in creating a nonprofit of your own of some kind?
I've thought about this a lot, and I think there's just a lot of nonprofits already, and I don't need to slap my name on something and create another nonprofit. But I do think that there's some significantly underserved areas. It depends what comes out of the company and what resources end up having. But the problem I do have with a lot of the big billionaires is that their philanthropies seem to be moonshots, right? How can we create a livable colony on Mars? Okay, sure. Right. That's going to be relevant 200 years from now, but as people dying of disease and starvation right now on Earth, right? Can we solve these problems? I went to the ATM the other day at like 12:30 a.m. Because I wanted to buy something to eat from the food carts and the halal food carts in New York. I didn't have cash, and I walked in and just smelled like feet in there because there's 3 homeless people sleeping in taking shelter. And I thought about this a lot. Like, why hasn't anybody built like public showers for homeless people? And I know there's a lot to fight through, is NIMBYism and things like that, but build showers for homeless people, right? Like, I would love to do something like that. I feel like things like that address immediate human needs instead of something 30, 60, 100 years from now. I think that's really underdone, and there's not enough people doing that.
One thing I hope to do in my lifetime is actually to give away, call it like 90% plus of my wealth. I feel like wealth just generally spoils the next generation in terms of character building. And I feel like there's a compounding, there's a compounding effect when you give. And I'd argue that the compounding effect of giving exceeds the compounded rate of whatever stock market return anyone looks at. Because I feel like just more generosity in the world generally sparks more. Like, I view generosity as generally contagious, where if you show like graciousness and kindness to a stranger, I'd hope that they would do so in turn for other people, and that would start this virtuous chain. And I think that's a beautiful thing you can do with money, assuming you have a good amount to give. And I feel like kids are just going to spend it on stupid stuff like Mercedes or whatever.
I feel the same way. Like, if my kids can attend university without taking on student loans, that's already a massive blessing, right? Like anything above that is gravy, and you got to teach them fundamental. I don't have any kids yet, but you got to teach them the fundamental values of like how to be a good person, how to earn a living, and to have everything kind of delivered to you on a silver platter. I think that just, you know. I have a few people in my network who grew up in wealthy families. They're wonderful, wonderful people. In a lot of ways, better people than most normal people. But I think that's the exception and not necessarily the norm. I think a lot of people who grew up in that environment are going to be pretty spoiled and not be as empathetic towards the needs of others compared to the average person. So I want to make sure that one day when I have kids, they don't grow up like that. If I'm blessed enough to be in that kind of situation, right? You don't count kitchens before they hatch.
Do you have a idea in mind how you would react if your kid either wanted to pursue a similar military route or wanted to become an entrepreneur themselves?
I mean, I would definitely encourage it. I think joining the U.S. Marine Corps is the best decision I've ever made in my life. By far. And I know I say this from a position of privilege because I got a lot of the Marine Corps, and I perhaps didn't give the Marine Corps enough, right? Like I think I was perfectly competent. I served honorably, but also mostly worked at a desk job. Like I never saw combat. I walked with all my limbs, and I know a lot of Marines. Even some of my good friends, they were not as lucky. They're not as lucky. But what you do get out of the Marine Corps. Now, forget the tangible things. Like, yeah, it pays well. By the way, it's a myth that the military doesn't pay well. Like, even at the enlisted ranks, for the qualifications you go into, to have like your housing and your food taken care of, and the base salary on top of that, you're making more than what the private sector will usually pay you for the most part, right? But beyond the fact that it pays well, the GI Bill is incredibly generous. Housing allowance, tax-free, all these things. Obviously, there's a downside, like you give away some of your freedoms, right? Like you're stuck for 4 years if you sign an enlistment, and you don't get to choose where you want to live. Like just send you to Camp Lejeune. Well, you're going to Camp Lejeune. Sorry, North Carolina, go and be hot and muggy and nothing to do. But what the Marine Corps really does well, and I'm guessing the rest of the military does, is that it instills values. It instills values that aren't taught enough by mainstream society. Now, not everyone walks away from the military with these values, but the military definitely makes a concerted effort in teaching these values. And what I mean by that, like we're taught in the Marine Corps that the thing that you have to value most is integrity. Like, tell the truth. Tell the truth. Even if it's bad news, the Marine Corps says the bad news doesn't get better with time. So if you have bad news to deliver the bad news. Okay. The Marine Corps teaches you to be decisive. One of the worst things you can do, making no decision is a decision. And the Marine Corps tells you that whatever you want to do, choose a path and aggressively execute that. And that's a lesson I took away from my startup career. Like, if I decide to do something, let's go, and let's go hard, instead of sitting there like evaluating it to death before you make a decision. By the time the competition's already surpassed you. The Marine Corps teaches you to care for others. The Marine Corps teaches you that two things are really important, and they're equally important. One is mission accomplishment, and second one is troop welfare. And they're both important. It's 1A and 1B. But what I learned as a leader in the Marine Corps is that if you take care of troop welfare, your men and your women are going to accomplish the mission for you. And what I found just running a small company is that when you go to bat for people, and when you're responsive to their needs, and when they feel like they trust you, they're going to go to the ends of the earth for you. I've got to tell some of my team members, yo, it's 11 p.m. Why are you freaking working? Why? Because they love the company. They love working with me. They're passionate about what they believe in. It's not because we pay more than anyone else, right? But they believe in the cause. And again, it's going back to troop welfare. It's going back to take. Whereas I feel like traditional management in a private sector is about like, how can I squeeze the most out of my people while paying them the least? Because that's a I feel like a lot of people do that. Like a lot of people do that.
True.
Like, that's my philosophy of like, how can I get the most value out of you while investing the least? Because their ROI differential is going to be the most.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that there's so many hidden costs of that, right? Like if you operate that way and your employee churns after a year, well, now you got to find a replacement. Now you got to take 3 months to train them. You might have to pay a recruiter 20%. All these are costs. All these are costs. Or your employee may be disgruntled, go to a competitor and give them competitive intel about you. Your employee may badmouth you publicly, and that might hurt your reputation, right? There's so many things. There's so many hidden costs that come with not treating people right, that it really is just cheaper to treat people right and be good to people and value them as core members of your team in a way that they deserve. So a lot of these just were lessons coming from military leadership. And I'm super grateful that my co-founder, even though he wasn't in the military, his parents were diplomats, so he's kind of a State Department brat, but he subscribes to the same leadership principles, right? Usually when I tell him something, I was like, hey, this is what I think it means to be a leader in an organization, and he'll be like, hey, yeah, I agree. So I couldn't have come across a better co-founder. I'm very lucky. He's better than me at a lot of things, but the key thing is that our philosophy to company culture, our philosophy to leadership are very congruent with each other.
That's definitely important. I think the number one reason startups fail is actually co-founder disputes, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all have them, right? As a co-founder, I think you're like a work marriage, right? Like there shouldn't be any secrets. Like you tell each other about everything, but there's also going to be conflicts because you believe that the company should be run one way or another, or you believe that on a tactical level things should be done one way or another, just like a married couple or just like a long-term dating couple. But the key is to have clear communications and give and take, right? You're never going to get everything that you want. You recognize sometimes that you're wrong, and I'm wrong a lot. I'm okay with that. And you apologize when you make a decision that like is incorrect, or you say something that you feel like may have hurt someone's feelings, or whatever the case may be. It's just like a marriage. So, not that I don't know anything about that.
Are you single?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm married to Actuate, unfortunately.
So I have a co-founder, and he's about a decade older than myself, and he's married, and he's been married for, I think at least a decade now, and our life stage is just really different because of that. And I hear all these stories from people who are married, and I'm like, dang, it's a different world entirely. You have to balance the needs and emotional needs of both your spouse and your children, as well as their physical needs and their logistical needs, and it's definitely difficult to juggle, especially for those who are trying to start or get a startup off the ground at the same time.
Yeah, I mean it's a blessing with profound responsibilities attached to it. So totally understand. I've definitely seen what it's like with it's my VP of sales. He's a happily married man with 2 kids, and sometimes he has responsibilities to the wife and kids, and sometimes I gotta be like, hey Dan, why are you still working? Go spend time with your kids, man. But very blessed to have awesome team members for sure.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share with our audience what's the best way they can get in touch with you.
Oh, I mean, feel free just to email me.
Okay.
Sonny at actuate.ai, so SONNY at ACTUATE.ai. And yeah, if somebody watches the show and thought that was entertaining and wants to reach out, I'm happy to have a conversation.